you are into movie and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz, and today I'm with...
Zero.
Zero, how you doing today?
A bit exhausted because work has gotten a little crazy.
Oh, God. Man, that's terrible. Yeah, we will talk a little bit about that at the end of this episode, but before we get started with our review of The Hidden Fortress, directed by Akira Kurosawa. Zero, I don't think we have to say much by talking about how important of a director Akira Kurosawa is. He's inspired many different directors in many different ways, whether it comes to his shooting or it comes to the way he builds his movies. To state how important he is kind of pointless at this point. I guess the question I have to ask for you is, what is your favorite Akira Kurosawa movie before you saw this?
It was always going to be Seven Samurai. Mostly because I just love the story of it and everything.
Nice. I have never seen Seven Samurai. I own it, and I've always intended to, but it's one of those things where you look at the runtime and go, ooh. I haven't actually gone around to checking it out yet. My favorite of the ones I've seen, is Akiru. To Live, I think is what it's called in the US, but Criterion has released under Akiru in this. I don't know if you've seen it, but that is a particularly moving and affecting film. It's really good, and they just remade that movie into a movie called Living last year, so I might check that out at another point. Now that we've talked about Akira Kurosawa a little bit, let's just get right to the review of The Hidden Fortress, directed by Akira Kurosawa. Zero, did you see this film before we reviewed it today?
Very, very, very long time ago.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, it was just one of those things that I remember seeing. I was like, oh, yeah, this is a bit less on the serious side, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No. That's what I was very surprised about when I was watching this. I was expecting, like any of the other Akira Kurosawa films I've seen, like Rashomon, like other films that he's done, to be fairly serious with maybe some light comedic touches, but I was really surprised by how entertaining this movie was. Because what he's known for really is pageantry, lots of drama, especially when it's in feudal Japan, because a lot of those types of movies are very serious. Whereas this one is, when I usually say this is derisive, but I don't think it is in this point. It's a popcorn movie. It's really entertaining, and at no point when I was watching the movie was I not entertained. I think this goes to show exactly how much of a master he was at directing films. I was watching this, and a part of me was in the beginning a little disappointed that this wasn't a more serious movie, but then after, I would say, 20 minutes, I'm like, all right, I'm in. I am totally into this.
It's not the usual that I have normally come to expect from Akira Kurosawa, but it's still very entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's entertaining because of, I think, the I would say the three leads, but no, okay, give the four leads. The four leads of the movie. And it's strange that the movie starts with the two peasants, who are played by Minoru Chiaki and Kamatari Fujiwara. These characters usually are, when they're made in, like, let's say, American movies, they're usually very annoying and pretty idiotic, and they're the comic relief to a point where you're supposed to laugh at how stupid they are. That's not necessarily what happens in this movie. To a point, they are kind of scoundrel-esque, and they are, well, they're very scoundrel-esque. They also are pretty entertaining in what they are, like the banter back and forth, how they bitch at each other and they yell at each other and call each other names. And that's entertaining in itself. And then when the other two characters come into the movie, usually that would throw things off, and sometimes the writing goes into where those characters aren't written as well, and they just get overtaken by the other characters. But the film does a really good job, I think, of keeping all four characters themselves throughout. There's a lot of times with these types of movies, what they do is they have people off the background, and then every once in a while there's a quip that reminds you, oh yeah, that's the asshole, or oh yeah, that's the moron. They allow these characters to be themselves throughout and define their characters quite clearly, while still being very entertaining. It
was kind of neat that the roles sort of stuck to where they were, instead of kind of like, oh, well, let's try just some dynamic shifting of roles, and, you know, maybe try something a bit experimental, because I think if Kurosawa-san had ran it that way, then the feeling of the screenplay might have come off as a bit disjointed.
Right. And another thing that these types of films tend to do is when they homogenize the characters, it just makes sense to make them all friends in the end, or to make them equals to a certain extent, which is not something they do in this movie. And I think that has to do more with the society that the film is based under than anything else. But because of that, it makes the characters still feel dynamic enough to when they separate, it doesn't feel off in that end. That necessarily isn't a bad thing when they've homogenized. It just in this movie it wouldn't work because it would drown out the character development of each character, which it doesn't do in this one. Performances. I really like the peasants in this movie. Tahi and Masasashi. Oh my god.
Madashichi.
Madashichi. Jesus Christ, I'm so terrible at this. Yeah, the peasants are actually, I think, the most entertaining in the film. It is funny how the film decides to play with who the main characters are to a point. What I was afraid of as the film was going on is when they introduced the new characters, they would become the main characters going forward. And that's not necessarily what happens, but it's not like the other characters aren't put in the forefront to a certain extent. But I do like the peasants in this movie. I think they're very entertaining and very funny in this.
Tahe and Madashichi, they're definitely the starting main characters, but when you have the mysterious man and the young lady join them up, they end up being additive roles instead of just pushing Tahe and Madashichi out of the picture. Mm-hmm. I think it was kind of great to see that there was an additive effect with the main characters instead of just, hey, we know that we started the movie with these two guys, but ignore them. They're no longer important. Pay attention to these characters instead.
And it goes to show how good the actors are in this movie who play the peasants, because they're able to still wrestle some control of the film when you have such a visually striking actor like Toshiro Mifune, who is in almost a lot of Kurosawa's films. And there's a reason why, because not only is he a fantastic actor, he's one of the best actors that has ever lived to do movies. He also has such a presence that captivates the camera as soon as he's on there. Whenever he is in a film, he just takes it to a certain point. There's certain actors who have that ability. And the fact that these actors were able to still have that semblance of control while Mifune is doing what he is doing in the film, I think goes to show how good these actors are. Let's get to Mifune for a second. Yeah, so I like Mifune's performance in this movie, but it's not as good as his other performances. But that being said, his other performances are a lot more serious. In this movie, he's made to play the strong man, the heavy, in this movie. So he's not necessarily supposed to be an actor or doing a performance that is very showy. He is more or less somebody who is like an enforcer in this movie. And the action scenes that he does in this movie are actually pretty damn good, I would say. I guess I was a little surprised that out of anybody in this movie, I was more interested in the peasants than I was with Mifune's character, because it's his performances that usually captivate in Kurosawa films a lot. But then I guess that wasn't necessary in this film.
With the peasants, there's also a bit of slapstick comedy every once in a while too, especially when their greed starts to get in the way of things. It almost kind of ends up being a bit of a slapstick bit, which was kind of fun because there are definitely some moments where like the tension ratchets up a bit and you're just like, oh shit, is stuff about to go down? And then suddenly the two peasants are fighting over something like, be it food or rumors or something. It'll be like, yo, get the fuck off of me. No, I want in first.
Yeah. It was really entertaining and funny what they would do with those characters specifically in the movie. And those actors play it really well. I gotta keep saying how good the performance is, because it's really rare for a comic relief character or comic relief characters to be the main character in this type of film. Because usually they're the ones having the quippy one-liners and they're kind of breaking the tension. And the film is done reverse in a way. They are providing comedy, and then the tension builds as the film goes, while the comedy that they are perpetrating is in front. So it was definitely a different take on that, and I actually enjoyed what the film did with that. I do want to say I did not like Misa Yohara in this movie. I thought she was kind of annoying, and when the suggestion was that she was going to act like a mute for the next hour of the film, I was like, thank God. Oh, thank you. It's kind of like Akira Kurosawa's like, this woman's annoying, we got to shut her up. So I was like, oh man. But I guess the question I would have for you is, did you like her performance? And is the way that she sounds, the way that her voice is, and the way that she projects. Is that common when portraying royalty in that time, or was this just a decision that the actress made that just seemed to not work?
I think it was just her trying to portray a tomboyish princess.
Okay.
And I think that's where it came from, but that's really my speculation on the matter. There were some moments where it's just like she was about as grating as like trying to cram my face against a cheese grater and then just moving the box grater. It was just like, I get it. Just, you're spoiled, you're bratty, you hate the fact that things have gone topsy-turvy, you want to get back to where things are normalized again, but you can't deal with a little bit of suffering with regards to the circumstance of your situation. Oh, God, just please chill out. Just, there are machines that are much bigger play here, and you're just but a cog in the machine right now.
I get that's the character's supposed to be. I think maybe bratty is not the right word. Well, you know what? No. You have a point that she is a little bit bratty, but I think she's headstrong. She's somebody who, I don't know. I guess she thinks a certain way and that is how it has to be, but she can't comprehend that's not going to work at this very moment. Like, that has worked for her throughout her entire life, but at that moment, it won't. And she's just not grasping it at that point with certain scenes in the film. But yeah, I just felt that the performance from her was like, oh, God. It was fine when she wasn't talking. I'm not trying to be that derisive. Like, when she was not talking, she was actually pretty good. And she actually played the mute pretty well to a certain extent. And she played it pretty well in the fact where she has to pretend to be a mute. So she's pretending to be a mute, trying to convince the others she is a mute. Like, it's actually, in that essence, it's actually a pretty good performance. But the voice and the way that she did the dialogue was grating. I was like, oh, God, why? So yeah, I didn't really particularly like that performance. Direction. There are some really good shots of the Hidden Fortress, of certain scenes, such as the Fire Festival. Other than that, it's a decent directing job. It's shot pretty well. It's not one of Akira Kurosawa's best, but there are some glimmers of his mastery, I would say.
Overall, I thought it was a fine film. Definitely not as serious as some of his other works, but just fairly entertaining. If I was to introduce somebody to some of Kurosawa's works, this one would probably be maybe one of the first ones to introduce someone to, mostly because it's a bit lighthearted. It's not quite so outright serious from the get-go.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would just say, well, if you like that, here's a whole bunch of other Kurosawa films.
You want to depress yourself? Here's Kikiru. Like, wait, what? But no, yeah, I actually agree with you right there. I think if you are going to give somebody, especially somebody who has an aversion to like foreign language films, if you say to them, actually, this is a lot like I don't know, there's like a lot of films of this, like pick a buddy comedy. I don't know. But it's a lot like this film, but it's in Japanese, and it's actually very entertaining. I would agree with you. That would actually be a great idea. So maybe we should get Kim on this. What do you think? You think we can convince her?
That would be an interesting one.
Yeah, I don't know about that. All right, we're getting spoilers for The Hidden Fortress, directed by Akira Kurosawa. If you have not seen it, you should stop and come back when you're ready. We're getting the spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's one thing I want to mention within spoilers, and it's something that, as I was watching this film, I wish I did not know about before watching it. And this is not really a spoiler of the movie, but because of what I'm about to say, I think it would be better for me to not say this during the review. And it's that I wish I didn't know that George Lucas found inspiration for this movie in Star Wars, because there were so many things in this movie. Like, it's not a direct one-to-one translation that Star Wars is of this, but there are so many things in this movie that I saw, and I was like, oh yeah, I can see where George Lucas got that from. Oh yeah, that's C-3PO. Oh, that's clearly Obi-Wan. Oh yeah, that's Princess Leia. Oh, I know what that scene is about. Oh yeah, it's kind of like this. Like, it is actually kind of stunning at times where I was watching this going, yeah, I could see how he got the inspiration for Star Wars, really, on this. You've seen Star Wars, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. It was clear that the peasants were fashioned into C-3PO and R2-D2.
Oh yeah, most certainly.
Yeah. I would say that Mifune's character is a mix. I would say Obi-Wan and Han Solo, but very little bit of Han Solo. Like, very little bit. Like, roguish in a way. And then, of course, Princess Yuki is Princess Leia. It's how I see it, at least. And then the whole premise of the movie, of them sneaking through enemy lines to get to their base, is essentially what happens at the Death Star when they're getting Princess Leia. In that instance, like, I watched this movie going, yeah, Star Wars took a lot of this movie. Even though he clearly did other drafts to take out those references, it is clear that the bones of that movie, of Star Wars, is in the Hidden Fortress. I just wanted to note that. Not necessarily a spoiler, but I didn't want people going into watching this movie thinking, oh yeah, that's from Star Wars, that's from Star Wars, that's from Star Wars.
Mostly just a lot of the influences and everything.
Okay.
Tahe and Madashichi are definitely C-3PO and R2-D2. Mm-hmm. Just that's kind of a given. Some critics sort of say that Rokurota Kabe, Mifune-san's character, is definitely Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. The crowd is pretty much unanimous on Princess Yuki being a one-to-one analog for Princess Leia. One of the thoughts that I thought was very interesting was that Kabe-san's rival, Hioi Tadakoro, apparently he's being kind of linked as a Vader-like character, which I'm just like, sure, maybe, but so it's kind of the opposite way. Instead of like going from like good to bad, now we've got like bad to good.
I think you'd have to take the entirety of the Star Wars trilogy to link him to Vader, but then that is also stretching it a little bit. I would actually put him more Lando than anything else, but then again, that's Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
I could see it to a certain extent, but that's stretching. I think that's stretching a bit on that. But I can sort of see it. I understand it, but I also am like, I don't know about that. Star Wars went through a lot of drafts before, and I think it was basically, it might not just have been to get rid of all the references of the Hidden Fortress, but to fashion the script in a good way, to make it entertaining. This movie is definitely not a one-to-one analog or Star Wars is not a one-to-one to the Hidden Fortresses, but the inspirations to those that movie is really there when you see this. So,
yeah.
I would say if we're going to have people watch this, don't mention Star Wars at all. In regards to spoilers for the story, this is an entertaining film, but it's not a surprising film in the least. Everyone survives in the end, and everyone essentially becomes friends in a way, but that's kind of, it's very Hollywood, this movie, but it's also entertaining in that way. I think the one thing that I had a little bit of an issue with at the end, a very minor issue, was the fact that I would have liked if the peasants were bickering at the end over who got more gold. Like, the fact that they were like, oh, you have it. No, you have it. No, okay, well, you have it. I'm like, I would have rather them fight. I'm like, no, I should get more. I'm like, just stick to the characters to a certain extent. But otherwise, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not knocking the film for it. This type of story has kind of been done a bunch of times. But this is just, I think, better because the performances are actually really good in this. And the directing is very good as well.
It was kind of interesting that you don't basically get to learn the identities of the mysterious man and the young lady until almost a third of the way in the movie. And it's just like, whoa, finally dropping the details on us.
Right.
But, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It was just kind of a surprising sort of draw out, since usually just with Kurosawa films, usually lines and allegiances are pretty clearly drawn right from the get-go. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. And then, of course, the main action scene doesn't come in until almost halfway through the movie. And that would be the duel between both Kabe-san and Tadakoro-san with the spears and everything. Definitely not like the most intense scene, but I mean, it was just the whole showdown thing was, you could just feel the tension and everything. It definitely wasn't bad, especially because like most of the movie is sort of like spy and espionage style stuff where they're trying to evade the Yamana clan and everything with all the gold that they're carrying and whatnots. And then instead of just kind of taking like a a tactical retreat and going, yeah, we'll surprise him later. Just instead, just Makabe-san just like, hey man, we've never fought before. You want to do a duel? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. I'm just like, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a standard thing back then, or is that kind of like a fallacy in the movie?
Dueling was something that was done back in the Warring States period and everything, where you would have like two generals who would basically declare a duel, and they'd just be like me and you, one-on-one, all troops to stand down, and you just have kind of the troops going, okay, we'll back off, and we're just gonna watch this unfold right before our eyes. So I mean, it's definitely not something that wasn't uncommon, but it wasn't exactly very common either. It was definitely kind of a there may have been accounts of, you know, just this person doing a duel or so on and so forth.
I am a little surprised, like you said, about them introducing those characters a third of the way through the movie. But then again, they mentioned the princess like right away in the beginning of the film through a sign that that one of the peasants were reading. So right there, when I saw the girl, I'm like, oh, that's the princess. That's definitely the princess. But that is interesting, especially when you have such a captivating actor like Mifune, who isn't in the film until like you said, the first third of the film. That was an interesting choice, and it actually kind of worked out. Final thoughts on The Hidden Fortress. I walked into this film not realizing this was just going to be an entertaining film, and after I got out of it, I wasn't disappointed. I actually had a good time watching this. It was a lot of fun. I had no issues really with the film, except for the performance of Misa Yohara in this. But then again, her performance was fine when she wasn't saying any dialogue. So I think this is a good movie. It's very entertaining. I had a really good time watching this. I was surprised by how much of a good time I was having with this. I am going to give this 3.5 stars. Maybe a 4 if I see it again and I get more out of it. But this is really entertaining. And like you said, Zero, I think this would be something that if I were to introduce a Kurosawa to somebody who hasn't watched him, this might be the right thing to go by in this one. So, very fun movie. I liked the peasants in the movie, and I enjoyed it. I had a very good time. So 3.5 stars for The Hidden Fortress.
I'm a little bit more positive. I'd say probably a 80% for me.
Nice.
It's a fun movie. Definitely more on the comical side of things. It's a really interesting direction for Akira Kurosawa to take, especially when a lot of his other films are just very, very serious in tone. I guess you could say it's almost kind of like a palate cleanser compared to the rest of his works and everything, and that's not a bad thing. The acting by both Minoru Chiaki and Kamatari Fujiwara playing Tahe and Madashichi respectively, just absolutely hilarious, especially when they bicker about just about anything. It's just an absolutely fun time. And of course, Toshiro Mifune, my god, he can just kind of command a presence when he's around, and it's kind of funny because when he's around, he just pretty much bring both Tahe and Madashichi in line. He'll be like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh god, please don't be mad. So, I mean, it was always kind of funny just seeing him as Rokurotsu-san just commanding a presence, just trying to straighten both the peasants. But at the same time, when he's in the presence of Princess Yuki, played by Misa Uehara, he's also very, very stoic and humble and noble as well too, because he's just got this like very, very strict adherence to his duty, that his duty is to protect the princess and everything. And even to a point of like sacrificing his own family for it. And even in doing that, just he is humble and stoic, even though just Princess Yuki's just going, no, this is wrong, you shouldn't have to sacrifice your family for this. And I mean, she comes off as sort of like the naive princess and everything, but at the same time, just Mifune-san just knocks the stoic part just out of the park with those interactions with Princess Yuki. So just excellent to that end too. But yeah, just this would be one that I would be very comfortable to recommend to friends who have not really experienced Kurosawa's works, and something to sort of ease them into the rest of his works.
I agree with you. Like we've said in the review, it'd be probably one of the better ones to introduce Akira Kurosawa in. As to Mifune, man, is there any other actor? There might be a few, But this is one actor who can just be in a scene and command presence just by being there. That is something different. A lot of actors, they have to do something, but he can just stand there with a look on his face, and he has the scene. Any movie, really. Tony Leung might be an actor that I would say would be Mifune-like to a certain extent, but in a different way. Because Leung, I think, envelopes himself into the role, whereas Mifune, you're making the role for Mifune. I would have to see more of his films, though, but every film I've seen of him, and he is the presence of the film. He is the film at this point, so. Kind of like John Wayne, I would say. Like, John Wayne is a limited actor, but for what he can do, he is fantastic. I don't know how limited Mifune is, but whatever he is in and whatever I see him in, he's such a presence that you have to keep your eyes on him throughout the entire movie. 80% for you, Zero. 3.5 stars out of 5 for me for The Hidden Fortress. Okay, so next week, here is what we're going to do. We are going to operate this next review as if you are going to be here, Zero. However, Zero has a lot of hard work to do in the Texas oil fields, so he is, he may or may not be able to be here. So we're going to operate on him being here, but if he's not here, no, I didn't fire him. I can't fire him anyway. But I could never fire Zero. Look at this face. You can't see it. But if you saw this face, you couldn't fire him. You couldn't do it. Zero, what are we watching next week?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, we've decided to settle on the Blues Brothers.
Yes.
I know it's been several decades since I've seen it, and I believe you haven't seen it.
I have not seen it. This is the Blues Brothers from 1980, directed by John Landis. Yeah, I have not seen this film. I've wanted to see it. This is one of these films that seems to be beloved by whoever watches it, and I've wanted to watch it, so I thought this would be a good idea. And we don't want to do something... This is the summer, man. I mean, we gotta be able to chill, relax. So why not by watching some fun and entertaining movies? So even though I intended The Hidden Fortress to be a lot more serious, but hey, it worked out in the end. All right, so tune in next time where we review The Blues Brothers, starring Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, directed by John Landis. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we will talk to you next week. Bye.